In July last year, we decided to summit Aneto, the highest mountain in the Pyrenees, and Maladeta, its neighboring peak. We were determined to do both peaks in one day. I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me give a bit of backstory to this. The day before we went for Aneto and Maladeta was brutal. We completed a technical ridge over 6 of the highest peaks in the Pyrenees. The day started at 6 AM and finished at 12 AM. It was one of the longest days both me and Viv ever had on a mountain. It took us 18 hours to complete. This was immediately after that day.
Hola. So yeah, yesterday was pretty much an endurance event. We're not 100% that we're gonna do Aneto tomorrow. We're gonna wake up and see how we feel, and if we're still feeling pretty rough, then we're not gonna do it.
We weren't in the best state. Viv's knee was hurting, we barely slept the night before, and we were running low on energy. We decided to go for the hut and see how we felt the following day, only going for the summits if we felt up for it. In the same evening, we started to feel a bit more alive. The verdict was, we were going.
How are your legs? What's going on there?
Do you have any other assets?
A few.
Hamstring, hip, bruised ribs.
So bruised.
Safe to say yesterday was brutal.
They haven't even seen my bum yet.
And they never will.
Of course, things weren't going to be that straightforward. There were thunderstorms scheduled for 3 PM in the afternoon. We left the hut at 5 AM determined to take the summits and be back by 3 PM. We had no idea what we're in for. Our first obstacle was finding an entry point in the ridge that separates Maladeta from Aneto. There are 2 portillons in the ridge, which means gates in French. Portillon superior and inferior. We needed Portillon superior so we can exit to the start of Aneto's glacier. The advice the hut keeper gave me the night before was to follow the cairns, which will lead us there. Cairns are stacks of stone arranged by people to help lead the way. The problem was that there were cairns absolutely everywhere, and the ones we followed had us cross Portillon inferior. This made us exit more than 200 meters lower than what we needed, straight into a boulder field. At times the boulders were human-sized and we had to climb over them one by one. By the time we reached Aneto's glacier, we lost 2 hours. Our decision here was obvious. If we would try to go for both summits, we would get caught in the storm. We decided not to summit Maladeta and instead focus all of our efforts to summiting Aneto and return as quickly as possible. We pushed ourselves to cover the 4-kilometer plateau ahead of us as fast as we could. At the end of this plateau, the incline became steep and continued at a challenging angle all the way to the summit rocks. Even with all the physical effort, there was only one thing on our mind: the 3 PM deadline. Before the summit of Aneto lies one final challenge: a badass boss ridge with a huge drop on each side. At the end of the ridge, and to our surprise, we found a bloke that seemed to want to get hit by lightning, possibly in order to gain some sort of superpower. I was jealous.
Quite literally at the summit, mate.
Yeah, I like this spot.
It has to be this one. That one doesn't count.
Yeah, I could try it. It's a bit slippery there.
We didn't linger on the summit for too long. We were pretty tired by this point. Before descending the steep slope, we decided to rope up in case of any bad slips or falls. We raced back over the plateau, and just before Portillon Superior, we saw the inevitable. This was the point where I stopped filming until we got back to the refuge. I checked all the camera gear in the backpack and we rushed down to reach the Portillon Superior. This Portillon was still the highest point of anywhere around us, so we had to make it up and across it as quickly as we could, because the likelihood to get struck by lightning was pretty much the highest up there. As we were making our way there, we bumped into a guy that was still heading towards the summit. And we both said to him that, like, it's a really bad idea to do that because the storm was rolling in. We actually tried to convince him to come back down with us, since especially at the Aneto summit, there's a lot of metal, including the summit cross, and there's a huge chance of getting hit by lightning there. But he didn't seem to mind, so he kept going up anyway. From the top of the Portillon, we saw what was coming in. There were huge waves of cloud rolling in. We started to make our way down some really sketchy terrain as fast as we could. We were both really scared, because this point was still very high up. But Viv was really shaken up about this, and I knew that she probably would be. When Viv was in university, she had a friend that got struck by lightning and died, which I think is a 1 in a million chance of something like that happening. But I can see how someone like Viv, who already lost someone in that scenario, can see it very likely that it might happen to us. This very rarely happens to us, but we didn't see eye to eye in that situation, because I wanted to go down as quickly as possible and just lose a lot of height. She wanted to take cover and be in a more crouched position, which is a very good idea also if you're in that situation. And we kept going back and forth with this, and we ended up losing a lot of time just kind of arguing about what to do. While this was going on, there was already lightning strikes starting to happen in the distance around us. Eventually we agreed on what to do and take cover together while this thing kind of settled down a little bit. We decided to leave our backpacks behind for a little bit because they had the crampons and the ice axes inside, which had metal. The moment I unlocked the straps of my backpack, for some reason she just took it and flung it off the mountain away from us. That was along with all of my camera gear inside of it. We found this sort of natural small cave made from some really big boulders, and we decided to take cover inside of that and just ride out the storm for a little bit. The next half hour ended up being very scary. Rain started falling really aggressively, and it started to go down on us as well, because the shelter or the roof of this natural made cave obviously wasn't like sealed tight. So we started to get wet and just very fast started to get cold as well. Lightning was going off, I think, about every 2 or 3 kilometers in the distance, absolutely everywhere surrounding us. It was super loud and disturbing. I quickly looked out to see what was happening, and there were these massive storm clouds that just looked like they were growing on top of each other. And they were rolling in very fast. In the next couple of minutes, we started to get a lot of hail coming in. This kept on going for about half an hour to an hour, but it felt like ages, mainly because we were sitting there scared and freezing. Actually, let's also ask Viv about this.
Hey.
Do you remember on Aneto when we were trapped in that under the rocks?
Yeah.
What were you thinking at the time?
I was thinking that we're gonna die. It was
Yeah, it was really scary. We were shaking horribly. I remember being so cold because it was pouring and the temperature had just dropped. We were listening to the sound of the lightning, trying to judge how far away it was. And I remember it kept getting shorter. And me and you just counting and realizing it was getting shorter and realizing it was getting closer. It was so scary.
You happy we made it out alive?
Yeah, I actually can't believe we did. I really thought that we were done for at some point then.
Eventually the sound of the thunder started to be more and more distant. We took our backpacks and we started to head back down in the valley. We then started to make our way down to the refuge, which even that wasn't easy at this point because everything was wet and slippery. This video of us at the refuge explaining what happened was immediately as we got down, and I was super exhausted and forgot to plug the mic in. I think it's a very good picture to see what state we were in after a couple of hours of getting tortured by all of this. One of the reasons I decided to make this video is because we didn't completely do the right thing in the situation, and I wanted anyone watching to learn from our mistakes. We did well for descending from high ground, especially when we were up on the Portillon Superior, because you don't want to get stuck at the highest point next to you when lightning strikes. Viv had a very great initiative to distance the backpacks from us, but that was because they had metal inside. Taking shelter in that cave wasn't the best idea, because if lightning was gonna strike, it was gonna bridge the gap between the rock above us and the ground below. What we should have done in that situation was take all of the metal work from the backpack, so the crampons and the ice axe, and place them as far away as we could from us, and then place the backpacks on the ground and go into a crouch position over the backpack. This gives you an extra layer of protection in case the lightning strikes the ground, and being in a crouch position means that you're as low as you can possibly be. I think the biggest lesson out of this is, if you check the weather before and you know that a thunderstorm is imminent, maybe don't try and race it.
Taking the bus back.